Tonight you will hear a story about a cabin in the woods, an old radio that should not work, and a signal that found a listener and refused to let her go. This is the story of Maya and the voice that followed her long after she thought she had escaped. A story about static in the dark, about laughter that never ends, and about something that lives between frequencies, waiting for someone to hear it. Maya moved into the cabin at the edge of the woods in Oregon in late 2014. She had been looking for a quiet place, somewhere isolated, cheap, somewhere she could finally be alone and think without the noise of the city. The cabin was old but livable, filled with leftover furniture and the faint smell of pine and dust. The landlord gave her the keys with a single warning. There was an old radio in the attic. It sometimes turned on by itself, he said. Probably just faulty wiring. Maya laughed. She didn't care. She had lived in old houses before. Nothing unusual had ever happened. She unpacked slowly, set her things down, and went to bed exhausted. Around 12:47 a.m., she woke to a faint hum from above. Analog static. The kind you hear when a radio is scanning between stations. She tried to ignore it, thinking it was her imagination, but it didn't stop. It grew louder, clearer, more deliberate. Something was happening in the attic. She climbed the stairs slowly, her heart pounding. The radio was on, still unplugged. The red needle slid across the dial like someone was moving it by hand. The static stopped, and a voice whispered, "You're late." Maya froze. That wasn't a broadcast. That wasn't a prank. It was human. Distorted, metallic, precise. She reached for the switch and cut the power. The light went out. The voice didn't stop. Something shifted behind a pile of boxes. Maya didn't wait to see what. She ran downstairs and wedged a chair under the attic door. She didn't sleep that night. In the morning, she found the radio's back panel loose. Inside, hidden, was an old cassette tape. She played it. Laughter. Dry, frantic, endless. A whisper followed. "They're listening. Don't let them answer you." The voice on the tape was different from the one she heard the night before. She didn't understand. She didn't want to. She packed a bag the next day, left the cabin, and drove hours away without looking back. Weeks passed. She tried to tell herself it was over, but she felt restless, aware, like the signal was somewhere behind her eyes, watching, waiting. Every quiet room felt wrong. Every hum of electricity felt like it could become something alive. She stayed at a friend's apartment, avoided all electronics, turned her phone off, and left it in a drawer. For a while, it worked. No voices, no static. She felt safe. But then, one night, she woke to a faint crackling, like tiny sparks in the air. She froze. The sound came from nowhere, yet it felt deliberate, aware. "You left me in the dark," a whisper said, soft but knowing. Maya didn't move. She didn't investigate. She ran out into the street, the city lights blinding her. People walked past, oblivious to the fear gnawing at her chest. The static was patient, calculating, watching. Even in the noise of the city, it found her. She stayed awake until dawn, convinced she could never truly escape. When the sun rose, she sat on a bench, breathing hard, telling herself she would never go near another electronic device again. She would avoid anything with a cord or a dial, and she would never, ever return to the quiet that allowed it to find her. But deep down, she knew that the signal didn't need a radio to exist. It only needed silence. And silence was everywhere. Maya moved to a new city, staying with friends, avoiding all electronics, refusing to touch anything that could produce static. For weeks, it seemed to work. Days passed, weeks, months. She returned to her life, worked at a small cafe, met people, tried to forget the cabin, the radio, the tape, the voice. And for a while, she thought she had succeeded. But even in crowds, in the noise of the city, she sometimes felt it. A low hum in the corner of her awareness, a vibration in the air she couldn't explain. She would stop mid-step and listen, heart hammering, certain she would hear it again. One night, she woke to a faint crackling in her apartment. Static, the sound of a radio tuning, though she didn't own one. A whisper emerged, soft, deliberate. "You left me in the dark." She froze, her chest tightened. It knew her. It had followed her all this way. She didn't move. She didn't investigate. She stayed in bed, covering her ears, hoping it would vanish. But it didn't. The sound shifted, circling her room, moving behind walls and under floors. Maya felt a pressure in her temples. She bolted out of the apartment into the street, the bright lights and traffic a temporary relief. She stayed at a 24-hour diner, drinking coffee until dawn, watching neon signs flicker and telling herself it was all imagination. The next day, she bought a cheap, basic phone, left it powered off in her bag, and avoided her apartment as much as she could. She told herself she was safe. For a while, it worked again. Weeks passed, the static stayed away, and she almost began to breathe normally. But she never relaxed fully. Every empty room, every pause in conversation, every moment of quiet felt dangerous. She began to notice patterns, small things she hadn't before. A lamp flickering once, a floorboard creaking with rhythm. The pressure in the air felt familiar, like the nights in the cabin when the radio tuned itself, when the voice whispered her name. She became hyper-aware of her surroundings, constantly scanning, anticipating the next sound. Friends noticed she was jumpy, tense, too careful, but she shrugged it off, calling it city stress. No one knew the real reason. She had to protect them from it, and herself too. She couldn't let anyone know what had followed her. Not yet. She moved again, carefully, selecting an apartment with constant noise, trains passing, traffic, people. She told herself it would drown the voice. For weeks, she thought it had. But one night, as she slept lightly on her couch, the hum returned. Low, deliberate, familiar. She awoke to a subtle vibration in the floor, like the pulse of a machine. A whisper, "You cannot run." She bolted upright, heart pounding, eyes scanning the dark room. Nothing. Yet it was there, patient, deliberate, in the air around her. She covered her ears, held her breath, but it found a way in anyway, resonating in her head, behind her eyes. Panic consumed her. She ran into the street, past cars, past pedestrians, shivering, trying to escape the sound that had been with her for months, years even. For hours she walked aimlessly, until exhaustion forced her to sit, until the morning light dulled her terror. The hum faded. She didn't know if it was gone or if she had simply stopped listening, but she felt it had won that night, that it had reminded her it could reach her anywhere. Even now, she didn't trust silence. She never would. And she knew, deep down, that it was only a matter of time before it returned. For several weeks, life seemed almost normal. Maya worked at a small antique shop downtown, surrounded by objects from another era. Old clocks, dusty furniture, odd machines no one used anymore. She thought the noise and activity would keep her safe, that the presence could not reach her here. But one evening, while closing up, she heard it again. A slow, rhythmic clicking, familiar, mechanical. She froze, staring at the corner of the room where an old reel-to-reel tape recorder sat, thick with dust and unused for years. Yet the reels were spinning, moving on their own, as if unseen hands turned them. Maya's heart raced. She didn't touch it. The tape was blank, unplugged, dead, but the machine moved anyway. Click, click, click. Then a voice came, whispering from the air around her. "I found you." Her breath caught in her throat, the hum of static built behind her ears resonating through the room. She stumbled backward, nearly knocking over a stack of boxes. How do you know?" she whispered to herself. The voice continued, "You changed your name once. You moved twice. You cannot hide from me." The words slithered across the room, wrapping around her, pressing against her chest. Maya didn't answer. She bolted from the shop, spilling onto the sidewalk, her shoes clicking against the pavement. Cars passed, people walked, oblivious to the fear thrumming through her body. She didn't care. Every quiet moment since the cabin had taught her the danger of stillness, the power of silence. She ran until she could hear nothing but distant traffic, until the voice faded to a faint, mocking whisper behind the hum of the city. For weeks after, she stayed with friends, avoiding her apartment, avoiding quiet, avoiding electronics. Yet she felt it everywhere. In empty rooms, in the pauses between conversations, in her own heartbeat. The tape, the radio, the attic, all of it had taught her that it didn't need wires or machines to reach her. It existed wherever silence could exist, wherever a mind was alone. One night, she dared to sit on the couch in her new apartment, the hum of the city outside making her feel safe, almost normal. Then the clicking started. Soft at first, like a metronome somewhere behind her, then louder, sharper. She froze. Her eyes darted across the room. The reel-to-reel tape recorder on the shelf was untouched, yet the reels spun again. The voice whispered, "I am always here." Maya felt it in her chest, a cold pressure, a pull she could not resist. She bolted again, ran to the street, shivering, her heart pounding in her ears. The city lights were temporary shields, the crowd a fragile distraction. For hours she wandered, exhausted, afraid to return to the apartment, afraid to sleep. When she finally sat on a bench, she tried to breathe, tried to convince herself it was over, that perhaps it would leave her alone this time. But she knew, deep down, that patience was its ally, that silence was its domain, and that one day, if she wasn't careful, it would claim her completely. Even the hum of distant traffic, the chatter of people, all of it reminded her that she could never truly escape. And she realized that every time she thought she had, it was only a pause, a moment before the signal found her again. Maya tried to convince herself that the constant movement, the noise, the company of strangers would keep her safe. She stayed with a cousin for a while, in a crowded neighborhood full of traffic and late-night chatter. She thought the constant background noise would drown out the hum, the static, the presence that had followed her across states. For a few weeks it seemed to work. She slept lightly but without terror, ate meals without anxiety, and even began to feel normal again. But one night, after finally drifting into an uneasy sleep on her couch, she awoke to a low, deliberate hum emanating from the kitchen. Her heart thumped. The hum had the same rhythm she had felt in the cabin, in every apartment since. She held her breath, listening. Then came the whisper, soft and insistent. "You left me in the dark." She didn't investigate. She bolted outside, barefoot, shivering, sitting on the sidewalk as dawn crept over the horizon. Days later, she returned, thinking the moment had passed, only to find a strip of black tape behind her couch. She didn't remember placing it. Underneath, faintly scratched into the paint, was a time, 12:47. Her eyes widened, the same time she first heard the radio. The hum was patient, calculating, watching. Every quiet moment reminded her of it. It didn't need a device to exist. It was in the air, in the spaces between sound, in the silence she had so desperately tried to avoid. At work, in shops, on the street, she felt it. A pull in her chest, a vibration in her temples, a whisper she couldn't quite hear but knew was there. She stopped trusting her own perception. A floorboard creaking too precisely, a flicker in a lamp, the static between channels on a TV she didn't even own. All of it made her tense, afraid, hyper-aware. Friends noticed. They commented she seemed jumpy, distracted, almost paranoid. She smiled and laughed it off, but the truth was she knew they couldn't understand. They had never been followed. They had never been listened to. She avoided electronics entirely. Phones, radios, computers, televisions, all of it was a risk. She even began sleeping with the lights on, keeping the apartment filled with noise whenever she could. But at night, when the world quieted for a few fleeting moments, she felt it. The hum, the presence, tuning endlessly, waiting for her attention. And every time it appeared, she knew it was more patient than any human, more deliberate than any machine. Every time, it reminded her that she could run, hide, change her name, move across states, and it would still find her. The realization was suffocating. She couldn't live in fear forever, but she could never stop listening, because silence was never safe. And the more she listened, the more she realized the depth of its patience, the precision with which it followed her, and the inevitability of its attention. It didn't need technology, didn't need radios or cassettes. It needed only a mind alone and quiet. It could reach her anywhere. Even when she told herself she was safe, she knew she never would be. It was always waiting, always listening, always tuning. She had to keep moving, keep the noise alive, or it would claim the empty moments for itself. Maya became obsessed with movement, with constant noise, with ensuring she was never alone in silence. She moved again, this time to a denser part of the city, filled with traffic, streetlights, people walking past late at night. She thought the constant chaos would shield her from the hum, from the whispering, from whatever had followed her from the cabin. For a while, it seemed to help. Days passed without incident. She went to work, shopped for groceries, visited friends, and tried to convince herself she was finally free. But one evening, as she sat alone in her new apartment, the lights flickered. The hum returned, low, deliberate, familiar. She stiffened, listening, but the apartment was otherwise quiet. Her pulse raced. She told herself it was imagination, the stress of moving, the exhaustion of constantly running. But then, the old clock radio on the shelf clicked on. It shouldn't have worked. It was unplugged, battery dead. But the numbers glowed red. 12:47. Her stomach twisted. The hum built behind her eyes, vibrating through her temples, pressing against her skull. Then the voice emerged. "I am not here for your home. I am not here for your phone. I am here for the part of you that listens when the world is quiet." Maya stumbled backward, tripping over the rug, her breath coming in sharp gasps. She wanted to scream, but the words caught in her throat. Every fiber of her being wanted to escape. She grabbed her coat and ran, barefoot, into the street. Cars honked, people passed, oblivious to the terror driving her forward. She ran for blocks, shivering, heart hammering, until exhaustion forced her to stop. She leaned against a lamppost, trembling, realizing she couldn't go back. That night, she stayed on the benches in a park, listening to the distant hum of traffic, every shadow a potential threat. She realized that the presence didn't need electronics. It didn't need a radio, a tape, or a machine. It existed wherever silence could exist. It inhabited the space between breaths, between heartbeats, between thoughts. It had patience beyond human comprehension. It could wait, watching, listening, and strike the moment she let her guard down. The city lights offered only temporary comfort. Every quiet room reminded her that it could be anywhere. Even while she slept, it could be there, patient and deliberate, waiting. She couldn't live entirely in motion, but she couldn't allow silence. Every time she thought she could rest, she felt the pressure, the hum, the anticipation. She began leaving lights on, music playing, televisions running, anything to mask the quiet. Friends noticed she had become hyper-aware, tense, almost desperate, but she brushed it off. No one could understand. No one had been hunted like this. She didn't know what it wanted, why it followed her, or how it found her across states and cities. But she understood one thing with perfect clarity. It was always waiting, always listening, always patient. And one day, if she stopped paying attention, she knew it would find a way to make her listen in full. Maya realized that the presence didn't rely on machines or devices. It lived wherever silence began, wherever a mind was alone. She tried to convince herself it was imagination, a byproduct of exhaustion, stress, or isolation. She told friends she was paranoid, overworked, haunted by dreams, anything to cover the truth. No one could understand. They hadn't been followed. They hadn't been listened to. She learned to live in constant awareness, always scanning rooms, listening to the spaces between sounds, avoiding empty apartments or quiet nights whenever possible. She stayed near noise, near life, near chaos. Even when she slept, she kept lights on, music softly playing, television static running, anything to mask the quiet that it needed to reach her. Yet, in the smallest moments she felt it. The vibration behind her eyes, the hum in the air, the slight shift in temperature, the faint, deliberate whisper she couldn't fully hear but knew was there. It wasn't bound to wires or machines. It didn't need doors or windows. It could exist anywhere the silence was unbroken, anywhere a mind let its guard down. Maya began to notice patterns, subtle signals that the presence was near. The sudden flicker of a lamp, the click of a floorboard, the hum of electricity that didn't match the devices around her. Each occurrence left her on edge, hyper-aware, heart racing. She learned that running, moving, keeping noise alive was temporary protection. It could wait, patient, deliberate, calculating. Its patience was infinite, its attention constant. She realized she could never truly escape it, only delay its presence, only postpone the inevitability of confrontation. And yet, despite fear and exhaustion, she forced herself to carry on, to live, to pretend normalcy, to move through life while avoiding quiet, the true domain of the thing that hunted her. Each day, each hour, each night was a careful balance. Noise, movement, light. She could never stop listening, never stop scanning. Every empty room, every pause between conversations, every silent street corner was a potential risk. The presence waited there, patient, listening, and she knew she would never be free from it. She had survived so far by attention, by vigilance, by noise, but the knowledge that it could reach her anywhere, at any time, never left her. And she understood, with a cold certainty, that it would always be waiting, always patient, always listening. And she could never truly rest. Even now, Maya lives in a busy neighborhood, surrounded by traffic, lights, and constant movement. She avoids electronics whenever possible, leaving her phone off, steering clear of radios, and never turning on any device that could hum or click. At night, she sleeps lightly, always with some noise in the background, a television, music, or a fan running. Sometimes, in the quiet moments when she thinks she is safe, she hears it again. A faint hum she cannot place, a vibration in the air, subtle and deliberate. Sometimes there are 3 knocks, perfectly spaced, coming from an empty corner. Sometimes whispers call her name from somewhere she cannot see. She doesn't answer. She doesn't move toward it. She runs if she must, avoiding empty rooms, avoiding quiet streets, avoiding any moment when silence could give it power. She has learned to live in motion, in sound, in constant vigilance, because the moment she stops, the presence waits. It does not hurry. It does not panic. It is patient, deliberate, calculating, waiting for the moment she lets her guard down. Even when she is surrounded by crowds, by noise, by city chaos, she can feel it. The hum is patient, circling her, listening, tuning endlessly, reaching for the quiet spaces she cannot avoid. Maya knows it exists where silence begins, where stillness reigns, where a mind is alone enough to hear it clearly. It has followed her across states, across apartments, across cities, patiently, deliberately, waiting for her attention. She knows that no matter how far she moves, no matter how much noise she surrounds herself with, No matter how careful she becomes, it will never truly leave. The knowledge that it is always there, watching, listening, waiting, sits in her chest, a constant pressure, a low hum behind her eyes, a presence in every shadow and pause. She has grown accustomed to this vigilance, to living with fear as a constant companion, to moving through life carefully, never letting silence grow long enough for it to reach her fully. And still, she knows that it will find a way to remind her of its presence, patient, inevitable, unrelenting. She tells herself she is careful, that she is alert, that she will survive another night, another day, another quiet moment. But deep down, she knows the truth. It will always be there. It will always wait. It will always listen. She cannot escape it. She cannot hide from it. It exists in the spaces where life goes quiet, in the pauses between noise, in the still moments when she dares to think she is safe. And in that knowledge, she lives, cautiously, endlessly vigilant, surrounded by noise, by movement, by anything that keeps the silence at bay. Because if she stops, even for a second, it will be there, patient and deliberate, and she will have nowhere to run. Let's not meet.